So many people ask me, why do I modify a Corolla? It's just a Toyota, they say. And it's not a fast car, it's not a sports car. It's just a basic car. And you guys are right, it is. It's a very basic car. Nothing is amazing about it. There's millions of them out there. But just because it's not a fast or luxurious car, it can still be a fun car. And that was my plan for this car. So basically, it all started with me just wanting to learn how to drive a manual car. So with me, I was just looking around for, I really like Toyotas, so I was just looking around for just any manual Toyota out there, whether it's like a Camry, Corolla, FRS, even though I was kind of out of my price range, but I was just looking for just a daily driver that was a manual car, and that's all I was looking for, just so I could learn it. I've never driven a manual car, so I did not ever know how to drive one. I was never taught how to drive one, so I was just looking for one to drive. So finally I came across this Corolla at my local dealership, a 2009 Corolla base model. And the reason why it was a base model was because it had like absolutely nothing, and it was a manual or standard, however you guys like to say it. And so I went there, I went to go look at it, and I was so scared to drive a manual that I literally had them test drive it for me, and they test drove it with me in the car, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. So I want to buy it, and then I was so scared to drive it home that I had them drive it to my house for me. So, but then finally that night though, I decided to actually try to drive it myself, just to try to just learn a little bit of the basics of it. And I literally went to drive it around my block, and I probably stalled the car out 10 times in about 5 minutes. And at that point I was just completely devastated, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to learn how to drive a manual car. I have nobody to teach me. I just looked up a bunch of videos and tried to get as much information as possible. And so then after finally a few days of struggling, I finally started getting the hang of it where I could at least drive it. I was still stalling it out every once in a while at like some stoplights and stuff, but not nearly to the point where I couldn't drive it at all. So that was the beginning of finally I realized how much fun it is to actually drive a car with a manual transmission. It's fun to just be able to manually shift gears. I don't know what it is about it, but I think that is what really got me into like wanting to go farther into this car specifically. Was it was a manual transmission, and it's fun to drive already. And after driving it, I realized there's a bunch of things that I wanted to start modifying on this car just to make it, I don't even want to say modifying, but I wanted to add some convenience features like a new radio, some keyless door lock entries and stuff like that, and trunk release. I started doing all that at the beginning, and then it just started to get the ball rolling of me doing a bunch of other mods to the car, like plasti dipping the emblems and all the little tiny cosmetic stuff that is very simple to do, that anybody could really do. As long as you have a little bit of knowledge, you can do it yourself. So, and then finally I started moving into more in-depth stuff like headers, the exhaust, coilovers, and after doing that more and more and more, I finally got I started getting the courage of working on my car. As like every time I used to work on my car, I was so afraid I was going to break something, I didn't know how to do it, and so on and so forth. And finally I decided to buy the turbo for the car, because I finally had the confidence enough to actually know I could remove the headers, I could put a different exhaust on, I could do electrical, I've done all this other stuff. And so that's what finally gave me the courage to go straight into the turbo after working on this car for probably around 2 years or so. But again, why a Corolla? Why not a BRZ, a WRX, some type of Audi, some type of like other sports car? And to be honest, I've always wanted one of those kind of cars, but everybody has those cars, everybody modifies them, and it was just, I didn't want to do the same thing. I was even looking at Hondas, everybody does Hondas, so it was just like, why am I going to invest all this time that everybody else is doing these same things over and over again? And I wanted to be a little bit more unique. So that is why I kept pursuing on this Corolla, because it was something completely different, and it was different. I mean, that was the biggest thing, was it was different, and nobody else like really was modifying Corollas. I mean, I do see them here and there, but nobody did nearly as much work to a Corolla that they do to a Honda. Because even when I was in the middle of doing a lot of this stuff, I even had second thoughts of, should I have just bought a sports car like a FRS or I've always wanted a WRX, and it was like, I've had so many thoughts of just selling this car and buying a more expensive car, just because that's the normal thing that everybody does. And I guess the whole point is, I didn't want to be the normal that everybody else did. I wanted to start something a little bit different. And that's when like I realized that I'd love to see, like, I don't want to say sleeper, because I like the look of a sports car, but I like to just take your everyday car like this Corolla and turn it into something that is a fun, cool car to drive. I mean, it is my daily driver and I love driving it. So that is one thing I just love about having such a basic car, because not many people would ever see one of these again like this. So, as well as one other thing too is, yeah, you can go out and buy a $50,000 sports car, but people still want to modify it and change things on it, and nobody ever wants it to be like the exact same thing from the factory. So whether or not you modify that or you modify a cheaper car, I would much rather break something on a cheap car and have to replace it with cheap parts than buy a $50,000 car and have to worry about making everything perfect because you bought and have a brand new $50,000 sports car that you're gonna baby because you don't want to break anything. So having an older used car that has cheap parts is very beneficial, because it's super easy to replace a lot of the parts, or if you need a new part, it's fairly cheap and easy to find. But again, you guys are right, it is a very basic Toyota Corolla. You guys have to do things that you want to do and that you love doing, because it just, don't listen to a lot of other people on what they tell you to do, because there's so many things that people tell you. I've had so many comments to say, like, why do you keep modifying a Corolla? And it's actually what makes me happy. So I mean, all in all, it's your money and you get to choose where you spend it. So, and I decided to spend it on a very cheap Corolla, and it's a very fun daily driver that I have now that I get to share with all you guys. Thank you guys for the support, and all the people that support my content or even think that I'm just crazy. I'm just having fun.